Requiem Metal Podcast, episode 147, brought to you by executive producer Shawna Perez. Thank you very much for your support.
Stop us tonight. We take on the world with hatred inside. They have the reason we fight. Surviving the slaughters and killings we've lost. Then we return from the dead. Attacking once more now with twice as much strength. We conquer then move on ahead. My world step by. As now the sky will take your soul. My wrath of Satan, the master medieval man, guide us with every step. Our actions are growing with power and fury. Soon there'll be nothing that's left. The night is coming, the end is cut down. Evil is at our command. We touch with nothing, goes and conquer yourself. So hate all that we can. That's now this guy. We'll take your soul. My wrath of fire.
You just heard Evil Has No Boundaries from, I'm not even going to say, but it's from the Show No Mercy record. This episode, I think, is a long time coming. I'm Mark.
And I'm Jason. And welcome to...
It starts with an S and ends with an R.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
There's no demon in the beginning of that, or devil, or dragons.
Yeah. This is a show... I mean, I'm pretty sure Mark and I have talked about since the first episode we ever did of this show. I think it's fair to say that no non-extreme metal band has ever had more impact on extreme metal than this.
Yeah.
And you could make the argument that maybe it's had more influence on extreme metal than any other band, but I mean, I think, you throw Frost and Bathory in that debate and Venom, and it gets a little iffy, but I mean, I think Slayer has... they're a weird band because they've got street cred across the board in
across genres, across everything. Punk people, everybody has some respect for Slayer.
Yeah, I mean their songs, their guitar playing shows up on License to Ill from Beastie Boys. The hip hop genre guys dig what they do because they're sort of uncompromising. They've even when times got tough. Throughout a lot of the sort of dead years of the 90s, when it seemed that a lot of the thrash bands were moving off into the greener pasture, more commercial territory, they never did it. In fact, they did some things that were questionable, maybe. Putting out a punk record in the midst of all that. I don't know if I would call that trendy. I don't know if it was the wisest move in the world either, but at the same time, they were...
They've kind of always, wrote their own ticket, too. And I think the only years that I think are a little bit in question, I think Lombardo added something to the band that's people don't necessarily. And when you take him out of the equation, it's not the same band.
Yeah.
By any stretch of the imagination. He is such an unconventional drummer and added stuff that, and, you know, any kind of like cymbal grabs and rolls that nobody else ever would have put into stuff like that.
Yeah. And Lombardo will even be the first to say, like, when you read interviews with like him and then, you know, these old retrospectives, especially Show No Mercy era, Gene Hoglan, you know, Lombardo will say Hoglan's better with his feet, and Hoglan will say Lombardo's better with his arms in terms of just like what he does up top. Now Lombardo certainly is no slouch when it comes to like the double bass, but you know, I'll admit it's you know, Hoglan's pretty damn good at the double bass too. I mean, some of the stuff he does on Death Symbolic and things like that, but yeah, I mean, you know, he added such a crazy element that, you know, when he's lost for most of the 90s, it's, you know, it's a different band kind of in a way. But where our focus is going to be and kind of how we decided to sort of set this up is to look at, I guess you could argue 3 eras, maybe, you know, maybe that's the wrong way of looking at it, but it's the approach we're going to take nonetheless. Kind of looking at the Metal Blade years first on part 1. You know, we won't do these as, I guess, successive shows, kind of like how we did Priest was spread out a little bit, or how we did Death, you know, just kind of scattered about through, kind of, you know, when it tickles our fancy, and maybe it'll be soon, or maybe it'll be a little bit down the road, but then we'll look at sort of the first era of the Deaf American stuff. You know, I guess the Holy Trinity, Deaf American Records,
which are probably the most well known of the bunch. But.
Absolutely, you know, and then we'll look, of course, at the stuff beyond on the last show. You know, it's tough because I think one of the reasons you and I waited to do a show like this is, you know, what do you say about Slayer? That hasn't been said before.
Yeah,
and you know, we'll do our best, I guess.
Well, I guess just bring it in from our vantage points where we got into them and that kind of stuff as well, because I guess it's going to be a little bit different through anybody's eyes that's talking about them, because, you know, we'll throw in some trivia and stuff as well, but there's been a lot said about, especially, you know, the Deaf American era for sure.
And this is, you know, I guess the band, you know, Tom Araya on vocals and bass, Dave Lombardo drums, Kerry King, Jeff Hanneman were the 2 guitar players. You know,
truly multi-ethnical. We've got Chilean, and then Lombardo's from Cuba, or born in Cuba at least. Yeah. And
then there's a funny story where Lombardo was a 10-year-old and walked into a Cuban bar that his dad used to go to, and Tom Araya was like performing on stage, like at the age of 15, like doing. I don't know what he was doing at that point, like what type of songs, if it was like Latino music or something or whatever. And so he recognized them when Lombardo was asked to join the band. You know,
is the Lombardo coming up to the door doing a singing telegram? Is that actually?
I don't know. There's that legend of like he's a pizza man, or you know, there's all kinds of different things. But I know he was asked, I think, by Kerry to join the band. Kerry and Jeff had met each other when they tried out for. It's gonna escape me. It turned out to be like a southern rock band. I want to say Ledger was the name of it, and you know, the band obviously sucked, but they kind of met each other and found kind of a liking. And then Araya and Kerry King had known each other. They were in a band called the Quits, I think. I think it's the Quits. Yeah, the Quits. So you know, they all kind of knew each other through various circles and things.
Well, then, Tom Ray he's about 3 years older than everybody else,
and he was like a respiratory therapist and all that sort of stuff. And
there's all kinds of stories, you know, like Kerry King's dad, you know, and Araya both threw in the money to record, you know, Show No Mercy out of pocket, which who knows how much that was, but back in those days, I can't, you know, that's got to be pretty taxing.
Had a lot of money. You know?
No, I mean, they're kids, basically.
Yeah. I mean, I guess when they started, you know, Lombardo was 16, and I think Hanneman was 17, Kerry King was 18, and I think Araya was either 20 or 21.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because right now Araya's, I think he's 50, and then Kerry King's like 47 or something. So
so a 3-year gap. But, you know, so they come out of the Huntington Beach, LA area, which was kind of a surprise because most of what was happening then, of course, was the beginnings, the rumblings of the Hollywood Strip kind of glam scene.
Well, and thrash was San Francisco.
Thrash was all up in I mean, Metallica had to leave LA to get up to San Francisco. So, you know, they knew those guys, I guess, when they were still an LA band, and then, you know, they had to go up and hang with, you know, Testament and Exodus and the bands that kind of came out of the Bay Area and stuff. You know, I mean, there's, you know, I mean, we could go way deep into the trivial history and things like that. You know, you've got like stuff like Ice Titan was like their first, I guess, song that they wrote.
Yeah, which is on the box set.
Yeah, it is. And then I guess the first released song was, of course, Aggressive Perfector, which they recorded for Metal Massacre 3, you know, for Brian Slagle and those guys. And, you know, I mean, I guess the thing for me is Slayer has always been such a personal band. And I was talking to you before we did this, and I was saying how it's weird for Slayer, like, to me, to like start thinking about individual songs and dissecting them in a way. Like, I definitely have opinions on all Slayer songs, but I guess, you know, much like you maybe with Maiden, is like when I hear Slayer, it's just Slayer. Like, I just hear it. Like, it doesn't...
You're not saying like, oh, that riff could be from this band, or I can hear some, you know, rumblings of this in here or whatever.
Yeah,
it's one of the few bands, I think, you throw... I think Priest, Maiden, Slayer, you know, even Metallica to some degree, that no other band sounds like those guys.
They're
their own thing.
Yeah, they just
especially when they came into their own. Like the first couple records, there's a little bit of rumblings of, you know, new wave of British heavy metal stuff happening a lot. But when they each did like their quintessential records, there's no mistaking who it is.
And I think the tricky part about Slayer is what is that quintessential record? And, you know, you could have endless roundtable debates on, is it Rain and Blood? Is it South of Heaven? Is it Hell Awaits? Is it, you know, Seasons? I mean, and everyone's going to have a very strong opinion. I mean, there are some, you know, diehard Show No Mercy people. And again, I think I speak for you as well. Like, you know, we love Show No Mercy. It's still rooted pretty heavily, as you said, in the new wave of British heavy metal, which nothing wrong with that, you know, to be, you know, basically wearing a lot of Angel Witch and Maiden and Priest influences all over. But, you know, I think Show No Mercy is such a fantastic debut. It's right there, you know, with Kill 'Em All, like in terms of, or Bonded by Blood, and just in terms of really kind of making a pretty profound statement.
Well, and even just from sales terms, a typical Metal Blade release would sell about maybe 5,000 copies, and this sold 20,000.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, clearly they were doing something different. You know, they're taking this great formula of sort of Venom, Priest, and Maiden, and then, I don't know, evening it up a little bit, you know, and speeding everything up a lot quicker.
The guitar tones, and just because drums were kind of outside, you know, Maiden drums are fairly technical, but like Priest at this time, like Venom had very simplistic drums, and the drums in Slayer was just like unbridled energy.
Yeah.
And guitar tone wise, I don't know if they were tuning to C at this point, but you can definitely, especially on Haunting the Chapel, you can kind of hear the rumblings of what will become their signature kind of guitar, you know, crunch sound that I don't know if there's been... It's similar to, you know, to Priest as far as having that great of a guitar duo matchup, you know, with King and Hanneman, and, you know, Glenn Tipton and KK Downing. Like, those guys, they work flawlessly together.
And I mean, you know, there is no Slayer without the twin lead kind of stuff, you know. And I mean, Show No Mercy has a lot of rock and roll roots to it in certain ways, whereas, you know, when we get into the Haunting the Chapel stuff, I think you could arguably say that you know, they've left the station. You know, the train's left the station by the time Haunting the Chapel rolls through, because that's such a profoundly sinister and much more metallic and just an altogether different beast, I think. And it's weird for me because I was telling you before, I hadn't really made that connection, because I mean, I think of Slayer very chronologically, and I can hear the evolution of their sound, but like I said, I link a lot of the Metal Blade stuff just together. It's the Metal Blade stuff. You know, it all has that, you know, Bill Meteor production. He did all of them, including Live Undead, you know,
which is one of my favorite, along with Unleashed in the East from Priest. Those are my two favorite quote unquote live records.
Yeah, those are two definitely good ones, and definitely Live Undead. I find that I don't appreciate that enough, and then every time I pull it out, I'm like, wow, you know. And I don't know if it's because for me a really big moment, I guess, was we had gotten a hold of course, my entryway into Slayer was seeing the War Ensemble video on Headbangers Ball, like in 92, 93. I mean, so this was after Lombardo had quit, and the band was kind of on, you know, a where are they now kind of status. You know, no one knew what they were going to do, you know, if they were going to put another record out. And so, you know, we kind of got into them around that time. Went, instead of buying Seasons, just took a stab in the dark from Columbia House because of the description, and got Rain and Blood. You know, I don't know if I was quite prepared for what we got heard Rain and Blood. Didn't really know if I liked it at first because I really couldn't tell any of the songs apart except the first and the last one, which is what most people say. It's it's like 8 filler songs that connect 2 songs, Angel of Death and Rain and Blood and stuff. But I started mowing lawns to it and really started getting into it, and then I got South of Heaven used on tape, and I was like, oh shit, slow there was just I could hear the songs and understand the songwriting, and then getting a hold of Decade of Aggression on a cassette tape. And the weirdest part is, and this is you'll appreciate this, and people who are younger might not, when you didn't have access to information pre-internet, I didn't really know anything about the history or how old they really were, or any conception. And so when I put on Decade of Aggression and I heard songs that weren't from those 3 records, the only 3 that Columbia House Records had for sale, I was confused. I was like, whoa, wait, what is this? What is Hell Awaits? What is Black Magic? What, all these weird songs that were on that Decade of Aggression stuff. And so that sort of set me on a journey to figure out how the hell I could find this stuff. And that may sound absurd now with again, in the age of the internet, what do you mean find stuff? You can find just about anything you want. Yeah. But it took a little while. I actually, I remember finally finding Hell Awaits at a Harmony House in Saginaw and just losing my shit. I remember getting it for
CD
Christmas.
or tape?
That's when I was making the transition over to CD. It was my sophomore year in high school, and and so that's kind of how the Metal Blade stuff was sort of introduced to me much later than the Deaf American stuff. And so I have a kind of a weird relationship with it in that I absorbed it in a totally different way. It sounded older, it sounded really echoey, which of course it does compared to the crisp production that Ruben does. It sounded kind of eerie to me. It just sounded otherworldly because it was I don't know, I think I had gone through such a journey to find the stuff that once I found it, it always had this aura about it. And so
I think Slayer, outside of depending on how deep you want to go in the underground, I think Bathory on their second record really captured an evil vibe, but I think Slayer was able to capture the evil vibe, but also a clarity and not really accessibility, but I guess it really did, because they eventually sell truckloads like crazy. So but my entry point was South of Heaven was the first thing I got on cassette tape, and then went back and got Rain and Blood because I was told that was what I had to have.
You had to have it. Yeah.
And then it wasn't until after Seasons in the Abyss came out that I went back and checked out the other stuff as well. Okay. Because it wasn't that easy to find.
No, not at all.
I think at that point some of it might have been it was before they reissued a lot of it on CD. So it was okay, if you either have it on record or tape or somebody makes a copy for you.
That was it.
That was basically it.
Yeah. And so there was kind of a cool aura, when Grindcore Coon, who's done the show a few times, when he and I would sit and check out Show No Mercy. I mean, songs like Evil Has No Boundaries, which we started off with, jumped out to us because there was this youthful spirit to it.
There's a hardcore gang vocal in the background.
Yeah, Gene Hoglan is makes his album debut there. And that was his idea, apparently, to do some of the gang vocals. And I think that Tom's brother John and some other people were kind of in on
some of the roadies, the dude whose dad did the album cover for
Mercy. Lawrence Reed was the roadie's dad.
I hope that guy's still alive, because I would love to talk to him about that cover. What was going through his mind when he made that cover? It's so fantastic.
I think that would be a cool little article that Decibel could do, is to do a retrospective of the artists who contributed to Slayer, because
who's the guy that did
so
like Rain and Blood and South of Heaven, and
I can't remember, but they brought him back for
Christ Illusion,
Christ Illusion, so
because that was always another weird, not to go off track too much, but such a weird choice for album covers compared to everything else that was out there. See Bond and Bud Blood, and then see Rain and Blood, and you're like, wow, there's a goat at some kind of podium, and then there's all these people twisted heads.
It was just so messed up. In comparison to, and Slayer's always going to be compared to Metallica, the evil stepbrother. They're the Rolling Stones to Slayer's, or to Metallica's Beatles or something, just dangerous and all the pushing buttons in weird ways. But, Metallica had such iconic imagery of with each cover was very represented by like almost a single image.
Yeah.
You know, the sort of Master of Puppets image, the Ride the Lightning, you know, electric chair image, the axe or whatever it is, the sickle axe thing on Kill 'Em All, and you know, the Lady Justice. I mean, very simple, you know, and I mean
they're like painted punk rock covers basically.
Yeah, and Slayer was just a mess of everything, you know, collage of different things, you know. I mean, I think the one that really got me especially was Staring at Hell Awaits for a while, and just, you know, the demons like eating the guys as they're being ripped to shit. I mean, it looked like Renaissance, you know, art is what it really looks like.
It looked like
Judgment Day or Last Judgment from Michelangelo, or who's that Spanish guy that did some pretty wicked stuff that really looks like almost like pre-Dave Patchett type stuff.
I'm totally spaced out. It's like a one-syllable name.
Yeah, I have some of his stuff hanging in my room, in my classroom, so I feel like an idiot. I can't remember it. But
I'm a fucking art history minor. I don't remember, so...
I'm supposed to remember random stupid shit like that. That's my job.
I want to say like Goya, but that's not right at all.
No, it's not Goya. Goya did like French Revolution.
Oh, Bosch.
Yeah, it was, Hieronymus Bosch. Yeah. There you go. So, but, you know, when you talk about I guess the Show No Mercy stuff, like I said, I remember Evil Has No Boundaries. You know, Grant Kirkhoon and I both putting this as our in your senior yearbook photo, you have to put like favorite song and inspirational quotes and stuff. And we
didn't have that.
We both used this as our song, and I think we both quoted lyrics from Show No Mercy. You know, just ridiculous. You know, because there was something, I guess, like fun about it, and I always like thought it was strange once I got over the initial shock of their kind of I don't know if you would call it. I guess their Satanism, but it was like horror movie Satanism stuff. You know, it was ethical
Satanism. It wasn't about, if they talked about sacrifice, it wasn't them doing it. It was just like chronicling.
Yeah, it was just,
and a lot of it's just blatantly anti-Christian.
Exactly. You know, and that stuff never scared me after I kind of got over the shock of Rain and Blood, like Jesus Saves and Altar Sacrifice and stuff like that. I mean, there's something to be said when you're like in ninth grade and you hear like Tom Araya with very conviction, you know, saying "entered into the world of Satan." You're like, wow, okay, here we go.
Enter to the realm of
And so it's when
and then the guitars coming out of that too, it's just like
crazy, just slices through you. So Show No Mercy is tame in comparison. You know, there's not really anything like overtly evil coming out of this that Venom or other metal bands, Sabbath, whatever, hadn't really done.
It was a little bit more veiled, I guess, with especially lyrically. It wasn't you know right in your face.
Well, and there's this great thing where Bill Meteor, the guy that, you know, produced these Metal Blade records, says that when Haunting the Chapel, when they go in to do the studio to do that, and he first hears Araya scream out the cross, the Holy Cross on the title track. He was Catholic, you know. Bill Meteor was, and he was just kind of like, oh shit, like should I really be like, that was the first sense of like dread of like, wow, what's up with these guys? Like, are they, because Show No Mercy, they just seem like youthful, like, you know, metal dudes who were getting drunk and you know, crashing around the studio. And now he's like, oh shit, what am I into? You know, like, are these guys like Satanists or what?
Soldiers of hell, that's Warriors from the gates of hell, and they'll say we trust. Stalking that can't defeat, I am near. Watching the step that's a take. I'll take lives and show out no mercy this night. Attack those not knowing their fates. Brothers of the prison, night by pockets we are made. Allies with a dark and soul, our legions we must save. Fight for our eternal quest, God can't even turn. Evil starts tonight with us, your soul shall be mine. Stalking the not care to feel I am near. Watching the step that you take. I'll take lives and show out no mercy this night. Attack those not knowing my faults. you can die by the sword. Leave by the show and everything to change. The helpless mind taking you all. Down on my hand and pools of blood. Crush yourself as you fall. Mother's tyranny, forgotten the victims. Children's laws in the vein. Or in the maze in which I serve. Only the words of the Lord. Down on the soul. Down on the soul. Satan was all I left. Smart that shop to his pity. Trying to escape the gas in my hair. The love no longer exists. Here I tried to see us both. The hell in which we live. We turn our heads to the sky and listen for the steel. Down on the soul. Down on the soul.
Titled Captor of Sin.
Captor of Sin, Die by the Sword, and Black Magic, all three live from Live Undead, and then Show No Mercy, Final Command. We started off with Fight Till Death.
So fuck the pen, man. You can die by the sword.
Yes, you can. It's funny, as a teacher, having heard that song a lot through the years, and he does the same kind of speech on Decade of Aggression.
Yeah.
I actually never knew where that whole thing came from, but it came from the Ottoman Empire. And the Ottoman Empire had their social organization set up. They had the men of the pen on top, the men of the sword second, and then it kind of kept going down. It was like their caste system, their social ranking, and so that's where the term the pen is mightier than the sword.
Okay, so it was just reused by Teddy Roosevelt or somebody that was made it more popular in American culture.
Yeah. I mean, Teddy Roosevelt was around when the Ottoman Empire was still around. Right before World War I, there, before it came to a collapse. But I don't think it had much to do with that era of Ottoman people.
And he was more walk gently or walk softly and carry a big stick kind of thing.
Yeah, that was his big thing. So I don't know if that's where that. I'd like to
by the stick.
I'd like to think that that's where the term's origins came from. As as a history teacher, I like to connect things back to metal as much as humanly possible.
We should have Bruce Dickinson, do a chat with a class and talk about Genghis Khan and all this other shit.
Hell yeah, we're studying Genghis Khan
Alexander the Great.
Week. Yeah, hell yeah, it'd be great. But there's something. We were talking about before the last break about the live sound of Slayer, and I think Slayer, like maybe Kiss and like MC5, like the Stooges,
I would throw Maiden in that as well.
Sure,
I think they're at their best. The most quintessential versions of any of those bands is their live performances. And eventually Maiden recently has started doing that by actually recording everything live in the studio together. Kiss, it was the whole spectacle. Yeah, I think of the whole thing. And Stooges,
but even the funness of Kiss Alive and Alive 2, there's something more listenable about that than a lot of the studio stuff, which
there's that added energy that the cliche that the crowd feeds the band and vice versa, and I think that's totally the truth. And I think the ultimate goal for most bands, unless you're Dark Throne, is to sound like your live version of yourself. Yeah, if you're known as being that live band. Actually, I don't know, Metallica's never been the greatest sounding live band. I think their studio recordings are great, but bands like Slayer and Maiden, even Priest, I think bring more to the table live, energy wise, and also just the songs seem to come alive more.
Sure, and they become more sinister for Slayer in the case of the Live Undead stuff. The solos take on a more piercing nature. The Araya's vocals are more.
I mean, it's just it's relentless.
Yeah. And you really get the sense of what it would have been like to see this band. And there's this great quote that I was reading where around the time of the tour after Show No Mercy, before Haunting the Chapel, which is probably where a lot of this era, kind of where Live Undead stuff was recorded. I mean, it was recorded in the studio with a live audience of 60 of their friends. That's kind of how the story goes. So it's recorded live.
Some of it is I thought that after the fact the mics on the crowd weren't that great, so they had people come in. But the guys that are screaming, through a lot of the songs, there's guys screaming Slayer in the background, and not just the Slayer, but Slayer, just going ape shit. I don't think doing a lot of audio recording. That doesn't sound like something just okay, scream Slayer. Yeah. That sounds like somebody really fucking natural. Stoked for to see a band.
And I think their friends would have been the first to say that they were, the biggest fans first and foremost before, and so you get that kind of energy sort of popping off of Live Undead. And it's a cool little EP kind of size thing that came out right after Haunting the Chapel, so we actually kind of went out of sequence, but so be it, because we're linking the two records really. But I mean, Decade of Aggression, another live record that they end up putting out, a great Live Intrusion, that sort of Raining Blood live DVD that came out a few years ago when they're celebrating the
they play
20th anniversary
front to back and then get covered in blood at the end.
When we saw them, they performed Seasons in the Abyss completely live. Slayer's really the only band that I'll still, I guess, go in the pit for, even I didn't last time because we had seats where we were sitting watching.
We had decent seats though.
Yeah, it was good, worth it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I want to, but they're a band I'm like almost willing to like deal with the elements because it's just the energy is so. I don't know. It takes me back to like a special place, I guess, as a kid.
And it's weird fan wise too that Slayer runs the gamut. I was just talking with a friend of mine today about this, that in general, metal fans seem to run the gamut more so than any other genre of music of being either the complete heavy metal parking lot idiots that just scream fucking Slayer in the parking garage and want to like punch somebody in the face and then hug them afterwards.
Yeah.
And then the more intellectual crowd on the far end, and then they just have such a wide ranging audience and fans as well. And that's always been like one of the bands that no matter what kind of music people are into, everybody kind of likes Slayer to some degree.
And kind of appreciate them.
Yeah.
Know? And I think everybody realizes that there's a lot of honesty to Slayer. Mm-hmm. And so like, whereas
musically but not lyrically.
Sure, but I'm just saying,
but you can feel it in the music.
You feel that they're authentic. They're very there's a real authenticness to the band, whereas bands like Metallica made choices along the way that have made some aspects of their career inauthentic and I don't want to say sell out, but there's that element there,
But even look at like Rolling Stones' career seems a little bit more seamless than Metallica's career.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's because like metal's a more divisive, genre of music, but it seemed like if they could have done like Metallica could have done a more, hey, let's do some side projects.
Yeah.
But they became one of the biggest bands in the world.
Sure.
I'm not going to fault them for that. But Slayer's maintained throughout their entire career this, and not to the extent of like a bolt thrower, like not this like this sameness from record
ish kind of thing.
Yeah, not the AC/DC. There's something that you expect from a Slayer record that so far they've never not had it. Mm-hmm. They've changed the formula just a little bit.
And some records do it better than others, to be fair. But
there's some stumbling periods there, like the minus Lombardo era, and even the early 2000s stuff. Like Christ Illusion's a pretty decent record,
but it has some clunkers on it too.
But World Painted Blood is something that where they kind of came back and okay, this is what we are. Mm-hmm. Kind of like this declaration of Slayer. So, and the interesting thing from a musical standpoint. Slayer is the only band that I've ever known that you can actually play any song and turn it into a medley. You could take 15 of their songs and verge it in every song would seamlessly merge together as a medley.
Really?
I actually did that with a friend of mine. We used to play guitar player friend of mine who used to love playing Slayer shit. We do Slayer medleys nonstop because you could go from any song into another just by like the sustain, because they kind of operate in a small set of notes. Mm-hmm. And sure. The palm muting, the chugging, all that kind of shit. So you could make a great like kind of interpretive dance musical out of Slayer songs, I think.
I smell Broadway. I think it would be cool. They just did the Fela Kuti Broadway thing.
That's right.
Why not Slayer?
They did the Mormon thing, the Book of Mormon. Why not really amp it up and have Kerry King orchestrate Slayer the musical?
Yeah. I think there are things that Slayer fans are willing to forgive, and I think I don't think Slayer could ever live that one down unless they did it in the same way that like Entomb did,
the Unreal Estate thing
with the ballet or opera.
Well, I think
did something so abstract and left of center with it, almost like a horror.
Well, I don't think
sort of thing.
I think Slayer's probably only got another 10 years left of touring. Yeah, world touring, because
especially with the injuries to Tom's neck, you got Hanneman with the flesh-eating bacteria shit.
Supposedly he's recovering, but Gary Hole from Exodus basically covered in on the tour with him last time, like the Big Four stuff, which would have.
Yeah,
I just watched a video of it was from like behind Lombardo showing Yankee Stadium, and it was unfucking believable how many people
were going nuts.
We're at that thing. Yeah, and a band that's like basically the highest. Most visible satanic band in the world, and selling out stadiums and shit. Yeah. And granted, it wasn't just them, but still, I mean, Slayer can still fill up a fucking big ass venue for being blatant.
There's generations of Slayer fans at this point. Which is fun. It's very Slayer very Iron Maiden, in a way. that they've been able to mainstream such a unfriendly sound, an unfriendly lyrical approach, an unfriendly level of aggression. I mean, Priest and Maiden and Metallica, have their speed and their velocity and their ferociousness at times, but it's nothing in comparison to a song like Necrophiliac or Hell Awaits or Chemical Warfare.
There's never been a Slayer ballad
like that. Yeah, there's just their ballads are serial killer ballads. It's 13. It's stuff like that. It's weird stuff, and so they but there's a fan base. You look at like our society today, and you've got like a mainstream acceptance of like Walking Dead and sort of zombie fascination, and there's all of this stuff that was so like risque has become very mainstreamed. I was just looking at Decibel today, and they've had an article posted. I think Shane Melling wrote it, where it was talking about, remember when black metal was scary?
On a Decibel blog or something.
Yeah, and it was on the Decibel blog, and it really was sort of talking about like, I remember like when you first heard about the church burnings and stuff, there was like an aura around it, and now it's like Burzum's out of prison, he's putting albums out, no one gives a shit that this guy's murdered people. Like there's nothing sacred almost anymore. There's no one that's really able to like scare and push buttons on any kind of permanent level. And I don't know if it's because of our mass pop culture like consumption is just so, we're digesting stuff so quickly that nothing sticks anymore.
Well, and everything's out there. There's nothing that's, there's a lot of things that are taboo.
The great democratization, because you want to see horse fucking. Well, that used to be taboo.
There's stuff that's taboo online, but there you can, or there's, I don't know, the taboo things are still out there, but you can see them. Yeah. It's not just like, my uncle had this stag film about with a girl fucking a donkey kind of thing. Like, if you want to see that, there's hundreds of websites that have those videos for you and serve them up. Yeah. Like, I don't know what the next level of extremity is going to be.
What's going to
music.
desensitize us? Or resensitize us, I guess, is the better term.
Well, the government's trying to do that right now, but they're not. Whatever. But like guys like G.G. Allen and even like Anal Cunt, bands like that were pushing things in different directions. But really, how much further can you go with things? Yeah. So I think like almost extremity now is almost based on longevity to some degree, because I think Slayer is one of the few bands that I can say there's not a record they put out that I hate. There's a couple songs on some of those records that are not great, but in general, as a career, they have never deviated so far off track. They've always known what they wanted to do, and I respect the hell out of them for that, and have different permutations of that throughout their career, and even be able to come back with World Painted Blood, and I have almost I guess more of a South of Heaven-ish kind of vibe to the whole record. But coming back to what made them really what they are, and still like there's it's so weird that like bands can come back now and actually recapture that, because that used to be this weird fleeting thing that never ever happened. And so like always, I wish Megadeth would come back and do a good record again. I'm still waiting on that.
Endgame was okay, but it's not. It's not rest in peace. So.
Drop the Christianity there, Mustaine, and pick up the pipe again and
get evil, man. Start shooting heroin. Do something to make your songwriting skills. And so so you get into the midst of the era that we enter into now with Haunting the Chapel, which is where Slayer really amps up the evil. The title track, Haunting the Chapel, is obviously a direct attack on the church, and a very, this is where the S word starts to pop up. You start hearing Satan and things like that, which I'm sure, it was taboo in the early 90s. I'm sure in the early 80s it was even more taboo, as the PMRC is starting to sort of gain steam and
most bands before, like, kind of danced around the fact of talking about it. Slayer says it in, no uncertain terms, exactly what they mean. Yeah.
And I like what's always interesting, and Sabbath was able to do this. Like, you go back to like War Pigs. I think Chemical Warfare is nothing but like War Pigs kind of taken to like this new evolutionary level. Yeah. Where in War Pigs they drop Satan into there because they're talking about war is something that's evil and causing destruction to human lives, and Vietnam and all.
They're broadening it out. Like by the time Seasons of the Abyss came out, they were, I think, almost equal parts social commentary, Satanism and just
fascination with serial killers or something.
Yeah,
like
just the evils of mankind in general, and just like broadening out the scope of evil. And it wasn't just like praise hail Satan. It was okay. This all this shit's fucking terrible.
yeah, and that's what Chemical Warfare is sort of drawing from. Even though they talk about Satan in the song, it's really more like what War Pigs was kind of doing. But then you get Haunting the Chapel, so and then you get Hell Awaits, and then you get things like that. But you get a song like At Dawn They Sleep off Hell Awaits. It's about vampires, Praise of Death and Kill Again are serial killer kind of songs. And then you get stuff that's just so taboo. A song we've played on a couple shows before when we did the 1985 show. We played Necrophiliac. It's a great song, one of my favorite Slayer songs of all time, but it's been played a lot, so we're not playing it tonight or today or whenever you're listening to this. And so so they're definitely pushing the buttons. But I mean, I guess for you, what is it that you hear, like, to me, with the Haunting the Chapel, Hell Awaits era that's different than Show No Mercy, or really different from any era? I hear the Merciful Fate kind of influenced their songwriting a little bit.
I hear that more in Hell Awaits, I think, as far as not necessarily in songwriting, but atmosphere. Hell Awaits is the first time where they actually nail the Slayer atmosphere, where they do a good mix between the more aggressive kind of upfront stuff, and then actually have this kind of like weird, like eerie ambience to the thing where it's not.
I almost see that developing on Haunting the Chapel, but maybe.
Oh no, I see. I think Haunting the Chapel is that's like the tipping point for them, where they go from being influenced by bands that they loved as kids between basically coming their own thing completely. They're now the masters, and they're the ones that are influenced at this point. I think.
True.
And then when Hell Awaits, because I don't know how like prevalent this the EP was, like how many got out there to people. But Hell Awaits is definitely where Slayer is its own entity that everybody's like, holy shit, what is this?
Yes, this is otherworldly almost. Yeah, and definitely separating themselves from like what Metallica was doing or what Megadeth and Anthrax and stuff.
They were their own entity at this point. I don't think they were. I mean, I think they perfected it on Rain, but Hell Awaits is definitely the first time where like this is the first time ever anybody has ever heard this kind of music.
Yeah, it's a soundtrack to like
soundtrack to hell.
Yeah, to hell. You know, all those sort of things.
the opening thing, you can totally, especially as a kid, I could totally visualize, gates of hell opening up.
Join us. Said backwards and these kind of things. I mean, just crazy. So
and yet they never really got too much of a slap on the wrist from the PMRC or anything.
They got in trouble later for Necrophiliac.
Altar Sacrifice.
It was Altar Sacrifice and Necrophiliac's the song I think that was the court case song. It was one of them.
Well, Altar Sacrifice was the whole Paradise Lost documentary thing with those kids.
I think there was like later where they got accused where I think somebody like fucked a dead body and proclaimed that they learned about it from Necrophiliac. But
I think they were running under the radar for. It wasn't like Twisted Sister or Judas Priest or anything, or Ozzy Osbourne, that kind of
Although they're going to, when we get into part 2 of this, they're going to run into some trouble with Rain and Blood, with Angel of Death, with,
where people
Jewish
think
stuff
of
and the Holocaust stuff. And
whereas it's a fascination of terrible shit, of murderous people, of evil.
Yeah.
How are you going to totally bypass the fascist regime in that conversation?
It's tricky. It's a fine line, and I don't know, but we definitely have a lot to say about Rain and Blood when we get to that point. But thoughts on Chemical Warfare, Haunting the Chapel, Dawn They Sleep, Praise of Death, anything that jumps out to you about any of that stuff, any particular faves, I guess? Or I mean, for me, At Dawn They Sleep is
At Dawn They Sleep is a pretty, and that's another one that's more a vocally based hook in the song. Is like, so the funny thing is that some of these earlier ones, like Show No Mercy and At Dawn They Sleep, both are very almost like pop centric in their song structures, which is kind of, you wouldn't think that, but above all things, I think Slayer's a catchy band. They're all about hooks, but it's not about the brocore, hardcore breakdown kind of thing, but it's just the like incontrollably like banging your head to this stuff.
Yeah,
I don't think there's any band. I don't know, anybody that remotely likes Slayer at all, if you put on a Slayer song, they're going to start bobbing their head a little bit. That doesn't happen with every band. Slayer, I think, is the band that, I think, at the core of, like, the root of whatever how we feel music, I think Slayer taps into something that nobody else has.
And I found that girls I've dated will like Slayer above almost any other band that you could say is teetering on the more extreme end of thrash or even extreme metal. There's something kind of massively appealing about Slayer. And it's not.
It's the devil, you know.
There you go. There you go. It's the danger element, you know.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, and people like playing with danger. People like horror films. They like thinking about these disturbing things as long as they can safely exit the theater or exit, you know, turn the CD off or whatever. And so
back out of the mosh pit.
Slayer opens up that darker world, I guess, in some level, and certainly songs like Praise of Death and Kill Again are as dark as they come in certain ways. So, but cool, yeah. So see if you can hear, I guess, the evolution from definitely from the Show No Mercy stuff when we jump into Chemical Warfare and then Haunted the Chapel, and then we'll transition into a pair of tunes from Hell Awaits. And we'll talk a little bit more about Hell Awaits when we come back at Dawn They Sleep and Praise of Death. Enjoy.
Frantic minds are terrified, life was in the grave. Silent death rides high above the wings of revelation. Marching death from chemicals, arrogance has won. Annihilation must be swift, destroy without destruction. Gather the throne must be washing from hell, waging the mass genocide. Soldiers defeated by death from the smell, bodies lie dormant, no life. Rising useless from the land where they fell, demons are ready to die. Nothing to see when the sleeping souls lie. Chemical warfare. Artificial fucking beasts line up in death row. Generals and national defeats diminish from this hell. Vanish from the dying world, the lords of hell awake. Dogs of war are helpless prey to immortality. Gather the room must be watching from hell, waging the mass genocide. Soldiers defeated in death from the spell, bodies lie dormant, no life. Rising your souls from the land where they fell, demons are ready to die. Nothing to see when the sleeping souls fly. Chemical warfare. Nation grows from the dead. Hell and sea, the priest of death, to bring forth the Lord of the cross. Strike the 12, erase the dead. Death comes under attack. The ghost of sin, torment the priest. Their altar will soon be destroyed. Heaven's power, turning black. The judgment belongs to the dead. Black and magic, infest with lust. Lucifer will supreme. The crystal ball shows on the face. The last thing that's heard is the scream. your waiting life. Apparition from the pits of hell. That presence is the woods they dwell. They've been the lust, secrets in the skin, addicted to your blood, and go to sleep. a dream, only living to die.
All right, Praise the Death, At Dawn They Sleep, Haunting the Chapel, and Chemical Warfare there. So, so again, we're short on time because we can talk so much about a Slayer, and there's so much more to say, and obviously
I guess we could have almost sat down and done an album by album thing.
Yeah,
but I mean, how much Slayer do you want? Well, everybody loves Slayer, so who knows?
Hey, when we get to like episode like 300 and we've run out of ideas, so we'll recycle.
We'll never run out of ideas.
Recycle that the order of doing some Slayer stuff, but I mean, I think Hell Awaits is this this moment in time. There's a debate I'm sure we'll bring up on when we talk about Rain and Blood, where there's the people in the Hell Awaits camp, and then there are certainly people obviously in the Rain and Blood camp who fight about which of those two albums is the more supreme Slayer album. South of Heaven gets thrown into that mix. Seasons does.
As soon as you start that debate, it just feels like that metal show, and ultimately
exactly. It gets really tricky.
You have to look at the band's entire career, and it's not just one album's better than the other. I think there's more criteria than that.
I think Hell Awaits obviously represents the end of an era. I think they've taken some of the epic songwriting as far as it goes. Like songs that are like 6-7 minutes long. They're going to go in a completely different direction after this. But I think in terms of, the evil, merciful fate kind of atmosphere, the Venom atmosphere, the atmosphere that bands like Frost were going to sort of bring out, I think Hell Awaits has it in spades. It's a dark, sinister record.
But I think when you go over to Rain and Blood, it's basically squeezing that, and you're getting concentrated Slayer. You're getting exactly it's
purified. Yeah, it's purified, and some people appreciate that. And there's definitely more of that punk energy, and we really didn't even get into the influence of the punk on like say Hanneman's songwriting and eventually Kerry King's, but. It's something that we'll definitely explore, I think, in the next part for sure. But we're going to end things with "Kill Again," one of my favorites. Again,
Homicidal Maniac.
Yeah, great hooks, and really a profound change, I think, in Lombardo's drumming really takes place on "Haunting the Chapel" and "Hell Awaits." I think he's very subdued on "Show No Mercy" at times. I mean, it's great drumming for the time period, but I think he just amps it up, and you hear it a lot. Like
it's unbridled at
Dawn They Sleep with a great drum breakdown. Kill Again's got some freaking amazing drum hooks and things. So, well, let us know what you thought. Obviously we tried to do justice to Slayer. It's hard to know where to approach, and let us know if you liked the way we kind of came at things.
I think these shows might almost be not people like, well, I wanted a really unique take, but it's almost like a commiserating thing.
I was gonna say,
I think we all love Slayer, so we can all just sit around and talk about Slayer.
Like an old friend, it's in time for Christmas.
Every good holidays. Person that I know, I can talk about Slayer with.
Yes, that is true. That's true. I can talk about Slayer with people that don't even like Slayer enough because people know how much I like Slayer.
Yeah.
So they just totally accept the fact that I'm having a somewhat of a Slayer conversation with them.
Yeah.
It's funny. Even the kids just know that they can just bring up Slayer, and it's just something kind of random that I can
fucking Slayer, Mr. Undead.
Yeah. Angel of Death. Whatever it takes. So, but shoot us an email at requiempodcast@gmail.com. Check us out on Facebook, Mark and Jason. Website, requiempodcast.com. Lots of cool Christmas presents up there they can get, Mark, right?
There certainly is. You can get mugs, you can get iPhone cases, you can get my original art, you could do all kinds of things, but the best thing, the thing that really makes us feel good is when you go to iTunes and give us a star review.
Yep.
So far we're batting 1,000, and I love hearing the feedback.
Yeah, it's awesome to get emails and stuff.
We've gotten some fantastic emails lately that I don't really want to do a mailbag show, but I want people to know that we do read all these. It's hard to respond to all of them, but it feels really great when people give us like great feedback and great criticism.
Yes, yep. We're always in the mood for that. So, but for Slayer and Hell Awaits and Kill Again, I'm Jason.
And I'm Mark.
body dismemberment, drink the pure blood. Unrelenting need to kill, death upon you now. Anxiously awaiting, neck in line.